Welcome to the Juniper podcast, where we talk about the more nuanced aspects of being a pet parent with some of the most interesting people in the pet space. Let's get into it. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Juniper podcast. I'm super excited for today's episode. We're here with Erin Simpson, who's the founder of Wildcat. This is one of my favorite new brands. I bought a Wildcat bed for my cat, and he immediately climbed on it. And now him and my dog fight over it. So it's super comfortable, very high quality. I love this product, and I've gotten to know Erin a bit. Such a great founder, and just super excited to have you here today. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Allison. Thank you, Haley. I'm super excited.
Yay. So, okay. Can you tell us a little bit about you overall? I think you have a really interesting career leading up to starting Wildcat, but I would love for people to get sort of an overview of your bio.
My background is in marketing and PR and brand, which is, helpful when you're starting out your own brand. And also, sometimes it's like the shoemaker's kid has no shoes, where you're like, oh, wait, I care about this so much that it can be really hard to make a decision and things like that. But I started out my career actually working in my early jobs. I was at a luxury furniture brand, which also really started my love of design. And, I'm a self-taught designer and design all of Wildcat's products. And so that's something that, carries with me now. But yeah, I've always worked in PR and communications, and I just love helping brands tell their stories. And I spent time in beauty and across a few different industries, and worked in startups most recently before starting my own business. So I spent some time at Benefit Cosmetics, the makeup brand, as I mentioned, furniture and film and entertainment, and eventually made my way over to Lyft, where I joined pretty early, as the company was just launching for the first time. So I was a team of one for kind of the first year and a half of Lyft's life. And it was definitely kind of the early days of ride sharing as a whole. And so, a lot of our work in those early days was just, I was trying to get people comfortable with the idea of getting in the car, with someone that they hadn't met before. I had friends that were like, I'm not going to use that app. That seems weird. So it was navigating this, figuring out how to talk about something for the first time and make it be something that people trust and feel okay with, while also, working within kind of a lot of sometimes challenging, legal and regulatory frameworks as well, while you're also trying to tell this strong consumer brand story. So it was definitely a lot of the mental gymnastics for, telling a brand and calm story kind of from scratch, while also working within a lot of those different layers. So it was super exciting, and definitely gave me just a lot of front row experience to kind of watching founders build a company from scratch, because I reported into the founders. And so, lots of late nights and weekends.
Yeah, I'm not sure if people listening are familiar with what an impactful role that would be in tech. I also come from the tech world too, and you basically put ride sharing on the map in a lot of ways by being early comms at Lyft. And that is such an amazing career achievement that I feel like you're so humble about. But it must have been very interesting to be that close to the founders, building something like that at such a fast-paced place. And like you said, at this early days of ride sharing, we're very much can we even do this? It's the whole the plane while you're flying it kind of thing. Did that help you sort of become a founder when you were thinking about starting something yourself?
Yes. It's so funny. I used to actually joke with them. I actually brought my cat into work a couple different days, because I'm like, I hope my landlord doesn't hear this, but I was not allowed to have cats in my place. And so when he would be coming to do work, I would tell my bosses hey, I'm going to bring my cat and take over the engineering conference room and, just have her in there. So, but I was always telling them well, when I leave here and start my cat brand someday. So, seeds were planted there for sure. But no, absolutely. It was something I really got to see and watch, and I have a lot of deep, respect for all founders and, getting to work so closely with the founders of Lyft. I got to see how strong, they had this vision. And a lot of people, maybe don't realize, but both of them come from these backgrounds where they were one of the founders was one of the earliest people working in public transit ride sharing on his college campus. And they were people who held these really deep visions about, getting people to share rides with other people. And our original product, when I joined, was actually about ride sharing tied to college campuses. And so it was just something that I got to see how much work and thought goes into, when you have that deep of a vision and, wanting to have that integrity carry through. And countless times where the easy path would have been to kind of maybe shortcut some of that or do something that maybe was not alignment with kind of that deeper, for lack of a cheesy way to communicate with. It's like the heart of the business where it's like you're doing this because you care about this thing and you care about the people. And so I really got to see how many times that was actually put into play. And so I think that was such a great takeaway of like, it's sometimes a much longer path to do the thing that lines up with the whole reason you're doing it in the first place. But when you care that much, also that gives you so much strength and power to get through the slogs of when it is really hard or when it feels like everything is going wrong. Because like you said, it's like building the plane when we were flying it. I can't tell you how many times, it'd be like a Friday night and there'd be something and it would be like, oh my gosh, everything goes wrong. But on the flip side, you can do really fun, exciting things like have an idea and be like, well, if we did this, we'd have to like figure it out in 2 weeks and be like, hey, I think we can all like band together to do this thing. Should we do this like crazy thing for, Sundance or South by Southwest or, any of these things, and just be like, okay, let's like try this crazy idea. And, when you don't have all the layers of, I also spent time in corporate environments too. And so I think that excitement of like having that ownership and, also having founders who trust that it's like, all right, you take that and you run with it and, let's see how it works. And I think also that experimentation is such a valuable thing, because I think when, if you spent time in corporate environments, that sometimes to do one initiative will take months of planning and, checkpoints and all that. So it can be a little bit like the Wild West, and things also don't always work out. And so I think getting to see firsthand that things can go wrong and you can still also continue to move the ball forward is definitely something that I'm reminding myself of every day still now.
I feel like that idea of, keeping things moving even when they're going wrong applies so well to starting any sort of company, any sort of brand, and then also to the experiences that we have as pet parents in the first place. Like, we share our lives with these creatures, and it doesn't always go like the children's storybooks that we grew up reading. I mean, you said at the start of this recording that you literally just had to break up a cat fight outside. And like, that's not necessarily the dream, but it's something that you're doing. Can you tell us a little bit more about your obvious passion for cats? I love the photo of you as a kid with that cat on the About page of the Wildcat website. Can you share like your cat loving origin story and why it was such a natural conclusion for you to end up founding a cat themed brand?
Yes, definitely. I love getting to talk to other animal people because I feel like we all understand and speak the same language. And honestly, that's been like one of the most fun parts of, getting to work on this is just like, I'm like, oh my gosh, I get to talk to people about their cats and their pets and, like hear about all their little quirks. And so, no, I'm deeply passionate about it. And I love all animals, and I've loved animals, ever since I was the tiniest kid. And I'm definitely that person that like bugs, like all kinds of things. Like I mean, multiple times a day, I'm like trapping spiders and letting them out. So I love all animals. And I think also with dogs and cats, I love dogs too. I think I could talk all day about this, but I think that cats have a PR problem in a lot of ways, and I'm a PR person. So these are things that I'm constantly thinking about, because I think that, the perception is that like, cat people are so weird and offbeat, or like especially the stereotypes tied to women where it's like you're, the crazy spinster that's going to end up with like 1,000 cats. Where I'm like, that's like my dream. So, but I always also like to speak to just like a lot of us like love all animals and also love dogs too. And we just like happen to have cats as this like deep, deep connection. I think for me, I've always felt like cats are just in some ways like they're not of this world. They're these like weird, wild creatures that are like, they're so independent. What's so exciting to me about cats is like, they really haven't changed in a lot of ways for like thousands of years, like the cats that just like hang out in our house. And so, I feel like multiple times a day, and I felt like this ever since I was a kid too, of like, oh my gosh, there's this like wild, weird creature like in my house, and it's choosing to hang out with me, or, especially when I was a kid, maybe choosing not to hang out with me and me doing the, thing where you're forcing them to love you, which now that I know a lot more about cat behavior, I try to curb those instincts. But no, so I've always been really fascinated by them. I remember having, this is dating me, but like, my like disposable camera and spending my allowance to like follow my cat around the garden and fill like, rolls of like disposable camera pictures, and then like paying to get them developed and being so excited and being like, oh yeah, she's like standing next to the tree, just like the most mundane things they were doing. I'd be like so excited. So I've always just felt a very deep connection to cats and like a reverence, almost like an intimidation of like fascination where you're like, they're just the coolest creatures ever to me. And they have this, magic. And so when they choose you, as these like kind of like powerful, weird, just like wild things that live in our house with us. I mean, that's the greatest thing. And honestly, I believe that we can form such like a deep, meaningful connection with cats.
I can relate to everything you're saying. I'm a big cat person myself. My cat is 13. I've had him, but also I grew up with cats. But I think that, we get chosen by the cat distribution system. I think there's a dog distribution system too, but for some reason, the cat distribution system feels very magical. They tend to choose us and find us and all of that. So I love that. I think that's really like magic here on Earth. And I think Taylor Swift have a lyric that's like, karma is a cat purring in my lap because it loves me. But it's like, you feel lucky when they're sitting on your lap or they chose you. And I think that there's something really cool about like cats choosing us. And I think that's why it feels special and it feels different. And also why it's not for everybody. Some people like a dog that's jumping all over them. Some people don't. I think it's so rewarding when you love a cat. And after a while, they start to love you back. That's like a deeper love than the dog that, loves you from the second it sees you type of thing. Not that all dogs do that, but a lot of dogs are extroverted and cats seem introverted. I think people just like relate to these things in different ways. Obviously, there can be extroverted cats and introverted dogs, but generally we see a little bit of this. So I love that. So how did you go from like, okay, being a total cat nerd your whole life to the point where you had said while you were at Lyft in the early days, you knew you would start a pet company specifically for cats? Like, did you always have a vision for what the products would be? Or were you like, I just know I'm going to do something on my own someday? How specific was this coming together for you?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think like the vision was there even before the specific products were there. I definitely had ideas of products I wanted, but I think, I'm going back to, at the time I was living in San Francisco when I was, working at Lyft, and I lived with roommates. I had like the cat tree and the litter box, like all of that in my bedroom, like inches from my bed. And, so it's like right in plain view all day, every day. And I think there were like a few things that were really like big pain points for me, like being like, obviously like the aesthetics of these things that I had to stare at that were right there, especially when you live in a small space. And then also like the quality and the functionality. Like I can't tell you how many times I would, either buy something and my cats would use it, but it would get trashed. It seems sometimes like within weeks, or get like peed on, but it wasn't washable, or just like things like that, from stuff where it was like, oh, this actually looks kind of cute. And then they would never touch it. I had some of those same frustrations. And then, around the same time, so I started kind of using things that were intended for humans, for cats, like in my living space. And I would kind of DIY things, or just noticing like, oh, they seem to really love this like hamper, this shelf. Like, how can I kind of make this into like a little thing for them that, it just kind of very shoddy DIYs during that period. But I definitely like started thinking about like, I just kept waiting. I'm like, gosh, is somebody going to make this stuff that like actually, is going to like work better, last longer, and then, also like look beautiful. Ideally, we'd settle for just like looks a little better than what's out there. And around that same time, I had something that happened. I've always volunteered at shelters, and I was volunteering at, my local shelter. And around that same time, I was traveling a ton for work with Lyft. And my cat, Stella, who's now 18, who, I got only a few years after college, and living on my own. And so she started peeing on my bed all the time, every day. And I think it was because honestly, I ultimately, after ruling out some health stuff, it was like more of like a separation anxiety thing. And I can't tell you how horrible that was to live with. And I have so much empathy. So like if anyone is ever dealing with cats peeing on stuff, it's like, not to like talk about cat, my friends like roll their eyes, are like, you and your cat pee, because I get started talking about it. But it's like, this is such a big problem that people face. And if you're facing it, it can take over your life. So I, as somebody who loves my cat more than life itself, was seeing like, wow, if I wasn't the Erin cat obsessed person that I am, like I would be really close to wanting to give my cat up, with like living like this, because it was so affecting my day to day. And, around that time and kind of looking for solutions and talking to, I talked to so many vets and behaviorists, and I learned that, because I actually hadn't, even for being someone who loved cats, I didn't know that behavioral issues like the nicer term, for like peeing on stuff, but like inappropriate elimination, not using the litter box, not going to the bathroom where they're supposed to, or other issues like things that relate to destruction of stuff in the home, like scratching up furniture, all of those things. So any like those behavioral issues are the number one reason that cats are surrendered. And knowing that just kind of with, even with all of the adoption and things that take place, 70% of cats that go into shelters will lose their lives through euthanasia. So really understanding and hearing behaviorists even say like these types of things cause more cats to lose their lives than like, being hit by cars or anything else. And so like that was really that link for me where I was like, oh, wow. And it was a longer process to kind of break that behavior and also realize that there were things in how I was setting up my space that were not being as supportive. And then also ways that I could connect with her and make sure she felt stimulated and things like that while I was working long hours. And so there were a lot of different factors, but I think that just like was very eye-opening for me to understanding like, of course, we want to give our pets like the best stuff and, make them comfortable, make them happy. But this really is something that, not only can cause big behavioral issues and things that affect their health and well-being, but also it's ultimately causing a lot of cats to lose their homes, and I think that there really is almost like an information gap, I think, and cats are kind of suffering from this crisis of misunderstanding, I think, in a lot of ways where it's like, if I was the PR person, hired by like the cat species, it's like my humble honor for them, but, kind of helping people understand it's like, we're not like mad at a squirrel for not being a bird. Like we can't like be mad at cats for behaving like cats and doing the things cats do and reacting to their environment. And so just understanding how much the things in their day-to-day, their routines and their territory, like they are such creatures of habit and their physical surroundings are so critical to their well-being. That was the moment where I was like, okay, I have to do this because these are, it's not just about having something prettier than what's out there. Like I can make things that are designed for cat behavior and to maybe solve for some of these things before they become a problem.
I don't know if most people realize how big of a space this could really be. I mean, I also lived for many years in studio apartments with my cat in New York City. And I think I bought everything on the market to make a studio apartment a little more interesting for a cat. And I was also working long hours in tech during that time. And I would have to come home and just like really do a play session, almost like you would do with a dog, like, okay, now it's time to play because you've been sitting on your little perch all day. But there really wasn't and still isn't that many great things that you can fill your space with for cats. There's some, it is getting a little bit better, but Wildcat is really standing out in this way. So I'm super excited for you to see where this could go. Here at Juniper, we make content for your favorite pet brands. We're 100% women-owned and operated, and you can hire us to create your articles, blogs, videos, email marketing campaigns, lead generation guides, and more. Visit us at www.juniperpet.co to learn more. Thanks for listening. Let me quickly show, I have the bed right here. I'll show it so we can get a little video clip. Look at this. Look at the quality. You can flip it over for like 2 different colors. I was really torn on what color to get, but I just love it. I put it out. I have a senior cat. He immediately took to it. And like I said earlier, now it's just a fight every day between who's going to sleep on it. My dog puts half of her body on it too.
Oh, so. I love that. And I was testing this bed. My sister has a Frenchie and he's an older fellow. And the whole time I was working on the prototype for this, I was having her also test it. And now she has like 3 of them in different places in her house for it. So there are a lot of small dogs who love this bed too. But this one, I mean, this is such a, and I mentioned like I'm a self-taught designer and I'm such a furniture nerd and I collect vintage furniture and I always have. So I'm very inspired by design and vintage furniture. But honestly, the way I approached designing this was very much like as somebody who's obsessed with cats, like you're like your cat stalker and you see like, okay, they like to like lay in the dip of, blankets, like when they're scrunched up. I mean, that was, you mentioned your senior kitty with arthritis, even working on this, like I didn't realize how many cats as young as like 6 years old, a lot of them have signs of arthritis. And that's something that I was totally unaware, even though I was so, someone who really, really loved cats, that degenerative joint disease is such an issue. And I think that I noticed it when, over the course of a year, Stella just stopped sleeping in all of her favorite beds that were like a little more flat or kind of the donut shape, or the perches that didn't offer support. And she was always going in like the dip of the sofa or scrunched up blanket. So that was really like where the design for this started. And the early prototypes looked a lot more like a hot dog bun, not as aesthetic, but then it's like when you're designing something from scratch, then you start to, all these different steps of like, and then designing, I wanted it to hug, my cat's body. Stella is like under 10 pounds. She's small. My other cat who's stopped by Marmite is 16 pounds. And so then I'm like, okay, how can I accommodate all cat body sizes, and then also give them the ability to kind of self-adjust, whether they need more support for their hips or their shoulders. And then selfishly for me, I was like, what you said, Allison, I'm like, well, I don't want to commit to one color. Can I make it like two-sided, which that was its own thing, because it would have been a lot easier to just make it one-sided. And I wanted you to be able to, flip it. And, almost like in my mind, I was like, I want this to look as pretty as a throw pillow. So, definitely somebody who, if I was optimizing for any other factor other than making cats super happy and making something I want, it would have been a lot easier. But that bed specifically took like over 3 years just to get to kind of that form factor, and lots of testing with different cats. So that's the fun part.
Wow. The level of detail that you've put into the process, I think, is so impressive. And this idea, everything that you're talking about with like, we don't get mad at a squirrel for not being a bird. Like, this is one of my biggest passions in the pet ownership world, is that our animals are our companions. And of course, we love them and they are part of the family, but they also aren't humans. And I think that as time goes on, it's so wonderful that we see them more and more as part of the family, but also sometimes tied with that is imposing more and more of our human standards on them. And I think that that causes a lot of problems in the dog space and in the cat space. And I love that your entire product line has been informed by this idea of what is fulfilling to a cat in a cat's context, not only because the human thinks it looks cute. And of course, that's a bonus, which is fabulous. But I love that it comes from that foundation of like, what do these animals really need? Is that why you ended up going with the name Wildcat? Like, can you talk a little bit about the Wildcat branding and like how you took this idea, this passion for cats, and then, you turned it into this entire thing?
Thank you. I can talk all day about, just like how we kind of think of them as they can be members of our family, and also we can appreciate that they're, independent, like autonomous beings that are not the same as us. So, and I appreciate, all the work that Juniper is doing to help just educate all pet parents about these layers. And that's absolutely why I named it Wildcat. And that was something that from day one, even before I had, because I started working on a few different products. And, some of them are actually still kind of in the prototyping phase that got kind of bumped to prioritize other ones. But even before I had the specific products, I knew I wanted to call it Wildcat because of exactly what you said, Haley, like this idea of kind of celebrating. I always joke, I say like, Wildcat, we make products that cats would design for themselves, but really kind of like what in a cat's like dream living space, like where they were able to kind of do whatever they want with their, wild instincts and kind of build their world around them. And, what would they want to live in, and how would they want that to be? And I think, kind of just celebrating that fact and reinforcing it at every touch point. And so that was something really a big part of the brand. And, we mentioned earlier, like I'm a brand nerd and storytelling nerd. So those things, I care so much about those elements, even kind of before the like, oh wait, how am I going to make this work financially, of like, or, all these different things. I'm like, no, the brand has to communicate the vision. I think for me, there were a few different things that were really important to that. So one, of course, the name, reinforcing that idea of cats as these wild beings. And then I think also in the visual identity of that, I really wanted that to come through and kind of this like elevated design experience, but also make it feel like bold and powerful, but also really fun and happy. And I think that's something that I think that comes through also in like the shapes of the products and the colors, it all really ties together. And I think that's, that's my goal with the brand, is that kind of, there are things that just feel like, oh, that feels very Wildcat, or that's, and I've, even though it's the earliest days, I've had people tell me that, which makes me so, happy that it all plays well together, which is really nice. And I think that, it's like, when we talk about cats, I know everyone who knows me knows, like, they're like, when you talk about cats, your face changes. They're like, because I just like, you can't help it when you love something. They do make me so happy. And so I wanted that, it sounds cheesy, but like that joy and kind of celebratory aspect of like, cats are the best. Like, let's just talk about all their weird little quirks and all of that. So I think that I wanted that to come through in the brand with kind of like the colors and the humor and the shapes and all of that. And I also had these like small things that meant a lot to me where like I wanted there to be like 5 cat characters as part of the brand. So they're like cute little characters that you can see kind of throughout the, website and like kind of all through our different, touch points. But they're very specific archetypes of like, one is like the, cat that's like a little more aloof and maybe a little more shy. Like one is like he's my like the old man kitty that's missing an eye, and he's kind of like the less adoptable cat. There's one that has an ear tip, which is meant to be kind of a community cat. And there's of course ones based off of Stella and Marmite, which like, Marmite is like this constantly anxious, she kind of always has these saucer eyes. And so designing things for her. And then Stella is kind of like the wise, loving, more like calm one. And I gave her an earring in the branding. I was like, you have to have something like funny. But no, even just how those are kind of mapping back to kind of these different values of celebrating these cats as these, and not penalizing them for being maybe a little more shy or taking longer to get to know someone and decide if they trust them, or, kind of just, cats like, and having a senior cat and having that be like a big part of the brand. And, the cats that we show in the photography too, I'm always trying to show cats that, look very, just like, the cats that you'd see in your shelter, and kind of, elevating those rather than maybe a cat that might be seen as traditionally maybe more aesthetic. Those are all things that are really important. And also kind of these, like the fun and happiness, I think, I love. And I feel like at Lyft, we tried to have this come through as well. And where I was at Lyft before that, Benefit Cosmetics. And actually, and if you're familiar with the brand, Benefit has a very specific brand DNA. And actually, the woman who I worked with who developed the graphic design elements of Wildcat's branding was someone I worked with at Benefit and worked on a lot of Benefits packaging. So you can kind of see that fun spirit come through. But I love kind of having these moments of surprise and delight and fun. And so that's like, I have one here because I'm always like fidgeting with them. But like I make mini versions of the Wildcat scratchers that are nail files for people. And it's like things like that where it's like, I'm like, Erin, it's probably like not a smart business decision to be spending so much time and energy on this stuff. But I'm like, well, I'm never going to get to twin with my cat because I'm not going to like dress them up. But like we can each have our scratcher, and I have my human scratcher. You have your, So even just those things are like, how do we take any opportunity to inject that like fun and weird spirit, but also having it come back to a place of like, Alice in the bed that you showed, I named that bed Poison Lily as the color because I think that there are still a lot of people who have cats who don't know how poisonous lilies can be for them. And, even though the website is kind of bare bones, I wanted to have a guide, and it's on there, and it's cat territory tips. And it's all about how to introduce something new into your cat's environment, just because I think that there's still a lot of people who don't really know that like, oh, wait, I should actually like put this in this spot before moving it to its permanent spot, maybe so the cat can just take some time, or, all of these things. And so, my hope is that every touch point that you have with Wildcat, you might walk away with maybe knowing a little bit more about cats and how they, how they behave and what their needs are. And then also come and, get to like see funny, weird things like this.
Your branding and mission and vision is like off the charts as far as founders go. So great to see that. There's a lot of businesses that start up and don't have this in such a passionate way. How did you channel all that? Was this really just a mix of finding something you really love to work on and then figuring out, because it sounds to me like it was something you really love, what you want to work on, and what you're really good at. And I think a lot of people who are thinking about what they want to do with their life or their careers are really struggling to put those pieces together. Like, how did you put those pieces together?
Yeah, it's totally a struggle. And I really, I love getting to talk to other business owners and just helping support each other in any way we can. And I think that that's something, it's like they flow together because I care about it so much. And also it's still such a challenge because when you're building something from scratch, like everything takes 10 times longer than you want it to, or, there's all these different things where it can be really hard to kind of power through some of those challenges, so I think when you have something that you do care about so much, like I can honestly say, like, not even kidding, that there were so many times when things would go wrong, or I would have like made a decision and then be like, oh my gosh, like that, the way that this was packed in, like now this damaged a bunch of these, like all of those things happen and they can have big consequences, especially when you're just starting out. And I think that having such a deep love. And I would be like laying in bed thinking of like, okay, there's going to be some day where there's going to be like a random, in my head, I would say like a stranger cat, where it wasn't like one of my friends or family who was testing a product or one of my cats, but like there's going to be like a cat that I've never met and will probably never meet that like is going to use one of these things. And it's going to be like, that moment's going to be so crazy. And now that's come. And again, it's still really early days, but I think that like, that was the thing that I kept in my head when things would go wrong. Or I'm just like, oh my gosh, like, cause you want to abandon ship when it's like, you feel like you're, climbing this like mountain and the boulder like keeps like, crashing into you. But I would be like, there's going to be like random stranger cats that are going to like sleep on something I made or like have a better day or feel like warm and cozy or get to like, I mean, even like these scratchers where it's like the scratchers have been such a challenging thing because they're so big, they're so heavy, they're so like dense. But also like, I was like, I really don't want to like have cardboard scratchers in my house because they make all the shredding. And then it was like, okay, maybe I can make these because my cats love them so much and it makes them so happy. Like, can I problem solve for that and make one that like shreds way, way, way less and also like that cats are obsessed with? And so it's those things where I think the things that are challenges and setbacks, if you have, a really clear, deep passion for something. And yeah, I think that it helps that I am somebody who I'm really excited about brand and design. And so this is like, I mean, when I posted that I was working on this, there were people who like, I haven't talked to since like 6th grade that were like, oh my gosh, this is so you, Erin. Cause I was always, making things and loving cats. And so I think if you can carve out something that is your, dream ideal job. I mean, if I'm able to make things for cats and talk to people about cats and observe them and think about it, that's 100% something I would love to be spending time on. And so that's a bonus that kind of gets you through the times where it's a little bit more challenging that I'm still in, because I'm still just starting this out. And so, it's exciting to get to, talk about cats with you guys.
This is so great. I think your passion really comes through, and I think it's a good takeaway for people to really figure out like what that is. I think you want to be able to work on something for a really long time, and thinking about little Erin would be so proud and psyched to like see what you're doing now. So that's so cool. Okay, so question for you. I know you have a background in PR. I think PR is something a lot of people struggle with. So if there are any people with indie pet brands listening to this or potentially other kinds of brands, what are your tips and tricks for how to get some attention on a brand when you're first launching?
Yes, it's something I'm really passionate about sharing information about this because I think that PR can be something that is just like a black box and, very intimidating for people and also for, businesses. We're all just starting out. Every dollar counts. It's like we don't have the money to hire a PR agency or someone to do that for us. And something that I always want to make sure other business owners and other, pet business founders know is that you can actually do so much of this stuff yourself, especially in the early days. And I think that, no one knows your story better than you can. And I think that, a lot of people, and I'm always happy to talk about this too, if anyone ever wants to, reach out, because I think that it can be something that can seem like it's really difficult, but there are a few basic things that you can do yourself. Like if you want to put out even something like a press release, like that's something that there are services online where you can put that out for a very small amount of money to even have something just out there so that when people are searching for you, you have kind of your brand story in your own words. And that's something, people can use, ChatGPT or just look at other press releases as examples. And you can put that out to, announce when you have a moment in time. And then in terms of reaching out to press, the way that even someone who's been doing PR for 20 years, there's no shortcut for doing this research. And, there are fancy databases, there are all kinds of things. But the way I do the research is I literally start by Googling other brands that, might have parallels or, similar ethos or something that if an editor or reporter is interested in that brand, even if it's not a direct competitor of yours, but maybe it's something where you're like, this is something that has a lot in common with our business. It's a good proxy. Start by Googling them and seeing what people have covered them in the last year or so. Go to some of your favorite websites and just read a bunch of the articles and you'll start to see patterns of like, oh, you know what, this person here, they're writing about the intersection of pet health and sustainability, like they would actually be somebody that would totally vibe with what we're doing. And then you can actually reach out to them. You can, and all of us, especially as founders, we're very good at being scrappy. It's like you can figure out their email address and then email them. And, a pitch doesn't need to be more than like 5 to 8 sentences at most. And just being able to say like, hi, I'm Haley. I'm the founder of X brand. Like, I know that you're covering X, Y, and Z. I wanted to make sure you knew, because a lot of reporters, they are so inundated every day. They're like heads down trying to do their work and craft stories. And so they can't always be just sleuthing, figuring out the new interesting thing. And so your job is to kind of help surface some of those for them. And it doesn't need to be 100 reporters. You can pick 5 people, you can pick 10 people and say like, these are people that I think actually would care about what we're doing. And also, don't, like anything, don't be discouraged if you don't hear back the first person you try someone else, and it's just like a pitch doesn't need to be something, you don't have to be a PR person to actually do that. You can do, some of these things are very, very doable. And also people don't realize that a lot of these journalists, they love to hear from founders themselves. They love to hear from the person that's like the voice of the brand. That's the direct source of this information. You are the expert. You are that trusted source. So they're not having to hear from an intermediary. There might be a PR person who maybe has a relationship, so the person's more likely to respond to their email. But at the end of the day, they're looking for something that's really interesting and relevant. So if you have that, and if you do the homework to find the right people, that's half the battle, can be kind of figuring out who your story is going to resonate with. But we're having to do that anyway, whether you're, trying to find the right way to speak to your customers or to potential brand partners. It's really not that different. But I think that a lot of people, because it's not so openly talked about, they think that PR has to kind of go through this PR-ish process, but you can just do that yourself, so.
That's such a good takeaway, because what I'm hearing is that you can offer something to the journalists instead of it just feeling like an ask. I think when people talk about pitching, it's like, oh, I have to go pitch myself. I have to put myself out there. Like, yes, you're putting yourself out there, but you're also offering a direct source to a story. And that might be a story that they want to write. So you might be solving a problem for them that day. So thinking of yourself as like useful in that way. It clicked when you were saying it, that you're actually offering something, not just asking when you are pitching yourself. If it resonates with the inbox that it lands in and the person on the other end of it.
Yes, you're surfacing something for them. You're being helpful, and and there are times that this is a really great trick too, is that sometimes you can surface something to them that's not even about your own brand. That you're saying, if you saw something come out that was really interesting news, or something where you said like, hey, I know you're covering this. And you could do this on like the second or third time you reach out, say, I just want to make sure you saw this new, study that came out, if they haven't covered it yet, or something like that. This is something that a lot of PR people do, is like, we try to be that helpful resource. Like you said, Allison, you're offering them things because you have your ear to the ground in your space and you are an expert, and, they're doing 8 million other things. So, the best PR people and the best founders, I think, can see themselves as being this resource to help them do their job, because at the end of the day, it's their job to put things out to their audience that are useful and that are interesting to them. And so you're kind of helping them with things, you're helping them do their job.
Thank you so much for sharing your story with us. We're going to link out to where you can get Wildcat stuff, and we'll share pictures, and we'll show the video clips and everything for people who are listening to the audio of this. But definitely go check out this brand. If you don't have a cat yourself, it also makes a great gift for somebody who does. So
and my goal is to make things that look, so cute in your house that people who don't have cats yet are like, hey, I want to be in that club. Maybe I need a cat. Yeah, that's
maybe cat adoptions will go up from this. I think that's a great idea. Thank you so much for being here, Erin. This was awesome.
Thanks for having me.
That's all for today. To learn more and discover the best handpicked pet products, visit Juniper at www.juniperpet.co.